gardeners. So today I'm going to be doing a very highly requested video. A lot of you guys have been asking me about how to deal with shedding. So I'm going to go over literally all the little categories of reptiles so that way I can help you guys out with every single reptile that you may have. So for those of you that aren't familiar with reptiles, reptiles do shed, and it has to do with their humidity level. So reptiles do require a certain humidity level, and that is basically the amount of water vapor that's in the air, and that helps them to shed their skin. Reptiles do need to shed their skin in order to basically grow and get larger, and some of them actually do it just to get the parasites off of them as well, which is very interesting. So all reptiles do shed, and today I'm going to be covering snakes, lizards, turtles, and amphibians, because amphibians do shed as well. So to start off, I'm going to talk about snakes. So this is Vendetta right here. He's a baby boa constrictor, and he actually just had a fresh shed yesterday, so he's feeling amazing. So something with snakes is that depending on what species you have and wherever they come from geographically, they will require a certain humidity level in order to shed their skin. If your snake has a full length shed that comes off in one piece, then that usually means that you have the proper humidity for the enclosure. However, sometimes it does happen where the humidity is just not right, it's not on point, and the animal will have a hard time shedding and it will come off in pieces. So when something like that happens, it's good to be aware of that and help your animal out, because it's clearly having a hard time getting that skin off. And shedding is not a comfortable process for animals, especially snakes. When snakes shed their skin, it's actually very itchy for them, and they also shed their eye caps. So when they're deep in blue, they really can't see because those eye caps are covering their vision. So it's also important that if your snake is in shed, it's not a good time to be handling it, just because it can be way more defensive in that time. Which, if you think about it, it makes sense, because if you're blind and someone just grabs you, you'd probably freak out a little bit too. So that's how the snakes feel. But if your snake is having a very hard time getting that shed off, then something that you could do to help— what are you doing? Anyway, so if your snake is having a hard time shedding, something that can ease the shedding process is to take that animal and basically give them a little bath. So what I usually do when my snake is having a hard time getting that shed skin off is I put them in a container that's completely sealed. There is a little bit of ventilation just to be safe, but you want to make sure that the animal can't escape. You're going to fill that container up with lukewarm water. You don't want it to be really, really warm to the touch. You also don't want it to be very cold, but you fill it up basically enough so that way your snake can fully submerge within that water. And then you close the top off and leave them in there for about 20 minutes. And if you're going to be using tap water, I would suggest using ReptiSafe as well, just to dechlorinate the water. So after about 20 minutes, when you go to check on your snake, after you take your snake out, the shed should just come right off and there shouldn't be any more issues. So then the next thing to do would just be to check your humidity levels, make sure that you're misting enclosures that require it. If you have a snake that has a very dry substrate, such as like aspen, that is not something you want to be misting because it can create mold within the enclosure. So something that you could do is basically just to take the animal out and mist it yourself, making sure that you don't get the substrate all wet. And then if it has to happen and you have to give them a bath, that's something that you can do just to help ease that shed off of them. But if you have full pieces of just one piece of a shed that comes off of your snake, you're doing an amazing job and the humidity is spot on. And that's pretty much all it is with snakes. So they're like really easy, I think, in my opinion. So that covers the snake section. I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple sheds and then we will move on to lizards. And this is Vendetta's recent shed from yesterday, so it's just one piece. And as you can see right up here, that's literally his face. So those are the little eye caps that I was talking about that go over their eye that they actually shed off. And then when they're in blue, that's covering their eyes, so that's what makes it hard for them to see. And something that's really cool with boa constrictor sheds is that you can actually see their design a little bit. I don't know if you can tell in this lighting, but the little saddles that he has going down in his patterning, it actually comes off in his shed. So it's just really interesting. You can kind of see it at the end. But yeah, it's just really, really cool. And this is one of Bowie's. Bowie's shed is just massive. Like, it goes on forever. and ever like for her little eye caps. Let's see if we can find it. It's upside down. And there's Bowie's face with the little eye cap. But yeah, I am very proud to have this one shed from Bowie, because Bowie always has perfect sheds because she's a Brazilian rainbow boa and she requires a very high humidity level. However, whenever she sheds, she likes to poop in the shed, so I never get to keep them. But this one she decided not to poop in. So this is my one beautiful, glorious shed that I have from her. So the next section to cover is lizards, and right here is a bearded dragon. Lizards are known to also shed, but they do not shed in one piece similar to snakes, unless you have a weird species like a Abronia, because I know that they do it. But usually lizards just don't shed in one piece. It comes off in little flakes and pieces. So the best thing to do for a lizard is, again, to just give them a bath. So with a lizard, they aren't really known to escape. I mean, if you have a bearded dragon or something, you could literally just put them in the bathtub and let them soak for a little bit and then help get that shed off for them. I wouldn't ever suggest to just try and rip a shed off of an animal, just because you don't know if that skin is really ready to come off and you don't want to hurt the animal. So the best thing to do is just give them the moisture that they need in order to get that shed off themselves. You can try and work it off yourself very easily. You just want to be careful. Just don't be yanking stuff off of them. That's not cool. But bearded dragons, again, are a perfect animal to just give a bath. If you have a chameleon, that's an animal that isn't really going to tolerate the bath very well. So that's an animal that you're just going to have to mist down. Many others are the same way, and it's the same thing with geckos too. But with geckos, if you have like a leopard gecko or an African fat-tail gecko, that's why it's so important to provide them a humid hide, which is a little area that's very moist that they can go in just to get their shed off. And a lot of geckos, they actually just eat their own sheds. So you just want to make sure that, again, you're providing the proper humidity level to make sure that they can get those sheds off. If your humidity is off though, your gecko will have a very hard time getting their shed off. And it's very important with lizards because if they can't get their shed off, even for bearded dragons, it can actually like hurt their toes. So you want to check their toes and make sure that their toes have all of the shed off, because over time, if that builds up, it can start to kill the tissue and they may end up losing toes. And that happens a lot of the time with geckos, especially if they aren't provided humid hides when it's necessary. So it's just something, again, to be very aware of, and just make sure that you're keeping track of the humidity in your animal shedding process. There is no certain time that animals need to shed. That's another question that I always get. It's not the same for every animal. Each animal is an individual and will grow at its own pace. Shedding just means it's growing. So there is no certain time that an animal will shed. The only thing you can do is just make sure that the shedding process is going easily and help out if you find that it's necessary. And we have Banba over here. He's trying to be intimidating. As you can see, he has a tiny little bit of shed all over him, like on his back. Like, it's the little white portions. So for a veiled chameleon, he's the type of lizard that you really cannot give a bath to. I mean, you can, but it tends to stress them out, and it's just very stressful for them. Literally just have to continually mist them down and just make sure that that shed gets very wet. That way it can just come off easier for them, and then they will feel much better, because again, it's a very itchy process. And while we're talking about shedding for lizards, here is a perfect example because Chancho decided to take his clothes off today. As you can see, it's just all coming off in like random places. His actually come off in very large pieces, I've noticed, so it's just really funny looking. But yeah, so there's Chancho. I just upped his humidity and gave him a little bath, so it did the trick, and now all of his skin is coming off, so I'm sure he's gonna feel a lot better. Something that I've been noticing a lot lately is that with baby crested geckos, they tend to have a hard time with shedding. So you really just want to keep up with checking their toes and make sure, like as you can see, this one has a perfectly good shedding process going because the toes are all separated. He's able to use them. So he's really not having any issue whatsoever. If your gecko, it doesn't have to be a baby crested gecko. This happens to adult geckos too that don't have the proper humidity. If your adult gecko is also having a hard shed or a baby like this, it's the same exact process in order to help them out. With the babies, obviously, they're just more fragile and delicate, so you just want to be careful. But if you have a baby like this and it's having a hard shed, or an adult, the process that you would have to do is basically to just put them in a container. And what I would use is something like this. I'm just going to close this and make sure that little squeak doesn't escape. But I take a little container like this. It has holes popped out of the top of it. And you take lukewarm water and you spray everything down. Make sure it's nice and moist. And then you would just place the gecko inside of this. Put the lid on, close it, seal it, make sure that it's nice and sealed and the animal won't escape. You leave the gecko in there for, again, 20 minutes. And then if you are noticing that the toes are having a hard time shedding, what you would do is take a wet Q-tip and basically just work at the toes as gently as possible, just to make sure that you're not hurting the animal. And that is exactly how you can help out any gecko. You can do the same thing with leopard geckos, African fat tails, any of the geckos that are very delicate and having a very hard time with their shed on their toes. And the next type of reptile to discuss are turtles. And a lot of people may not be aware that turtles do shed. What they shed are actually called scutes, and that is on the back of their shell. And two things that you're going to need in order to help aiding their shed is a toothbrush. Make sure that it's not your toothbrush. Make sure it is a turtle-only toothbrush, because you don't want to get salmonella. And then what I use is Vitashell. So I'm going to go ahead and show you, because my turtle Bubba actually is shedding some scutes right now. So she needs a little scrubbing, so we're going to go get to it. And this turtle right over here is Bubba. She is actually shedding some scutes. So the scutes are, let's come here, silly. So all of these little round things on her shell, these are all scutes. And all of these shed off when the turtle is growing. So I have my toothbrush, I have my Vitashell. Don't run away, no! Now I have to go catch my turtle again. So I have my Vitashell on here. I literally just take it and scrub her shell. And this is very, very difficult for me to do because I'm literally holding a camera and I need two hands to do this. You get the picture, she's running away now. That is how you clean a turtle shell. So that was a complete disaster. Obviously would scrub the turtle shell way better than that. It's just impossible for me to actually do it while I'm holding a camera, because that is a two-hand job, especially if you have a turtle running away from you. But oh my goodness, so that is basically how you help a turtle with shedding their scutes. They normally don't really have an issue. It's not a big deal. They just come off automatically. But if you do want to help and give them some extra vitamins on their shell, you can use Vitashell. So that's just what I do. And the last section are amphibians, and that is the easiest one to deal with. There's literally nothing you have to do because amphibians require such a high humidity level that there's nothing you have to do. This right here is a tiger salamander. So the very easy thing about amphibians is that they do shed their skin, but they eat their own skin. Again, because the humidity level is so high, there's never any issues. So yeah. If you have an amphibian, you don't really have to worry about shedding, and they're just going to eat their own shed. Again, you want to make sure that their skin is looking nice and healthy, and that's pretty much it. So here's Ponyo, because I know you guys love seeing him. I just rarely take him out because you aren't really supposed to be handling salamanders, and this is cool. But yeah, there's his cute little face. So that covers pretty much all of the reptiles and what I personally do for mine when they're having shedding issues. If you guys know any other tricks, leave a comment and let me know, because I would love to let other people know. I get these questions all the time, so any helpful tips and tricks are always useful. So yeah, just leave a comment, let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that this may have helped someone, and thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.